All right, class, welcome to the first digitally interactive notebook. Our lesson one is going to be on Renaissance politics. We're going to have two DINs with the Renaissance. And I will tell you, I have literally changed how I'm going to do this DIN 100 times. But I think I found the format that is going to be simplest and easiest for you. Remember, the DIN is a chance for you to actually just throw in some notes that you can use to help you with the formatives and the summatives, specifically the summatives, and it gives you some trial and error practice before you venture into the summative. So don't sweat the DIN. You need to work and attempt and try. So our four guiding thoughts of inquiry and how we shape our thought towards social studies. How do things change? What causes certain behaviors or movements? What effect do they have? How do they continue throughout history? And how do certain things reflect the time period? To keep it simple with the Renaissance politics, trying to simplify everything to keep it just as focused as possible. Think about it this way. This question, how did blank contribute to the political climate of the Renaissance? Those are always the questions you are basically answering with this particular subunit. So here are hot questions. Hot meaning high order thinking. There are more than one answer to these questions. So here's some close notes. First thing I want to address is the power of the Roman Catholic Church. During the medieval period, they controlled all aspects of life. However, some events started changing, and that political power they had began to wane or weaken. The Reformation ideals started being pushed forth. The Inquisition, where they tortured people. The great strappado. This is a great one, where your hands are behind your back, lift your arms up above your head. They pull you up on a pulley system, and it disengages and breaks every single bone into your shoulder until you confess that the church was right. Love that stuff. The Black Death, the worst illness ever in the history of the world, killing large populations. But the one I want you to put into the highlight is the Great Schism. The reason that's important is you see some split in church power, and you see that man begins to control the church, and they don't always see the church as the know-all, be-all. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, the church, not just as a religious institution, but as a political instrument. For one thing, is the Roman Catholic Church collects money through tithing, just like churches do today. They tithe to keep their buildings running. Now, this tithing became a form of taxation, and because everybody was Roman Catholic, it became a very, very, very powerful economic and political institution. So much that they even got the popes to sometimes settle disagreements between nations, as you'll see in the Age of Exploration unit. So, trade. How did trade contribute to the political climate? Well, one, it shaped the economic geography. The biggest thing here is the fall of Constantinople. This is the city that connects Turkey into mainland Europe. And what happens is it falls to the Muslims. Constantinople is where the Christian church basically took root. But after the capture of the Muslims captured that city, it no longer becomes the bridge between the Eastern and Western worlds. Italy becomes the trade hub. And if you look at where Italy is, it makes perfectly sense geographically. It's in a great political position. As products become pushed into Italy and then widespread throughout Europe, well, they're the middleman. They become the stable economy. And as the economy stabilizes and their currency stabilizes, they begin to develop a banking industry. And of course, banks are all powerful. And we'll get more into banking in a second. These powerful merchants in Italy developed oligarchies. That is where a few people ruled. So Italy wasn't a country, it was a group of city states, each family controlling a different city, which is in essence a different country. Think of it this way: a different person runs means in Frenchburg. All right? Every single city within the county is controlled by a different family. So you can imagine the chaos there. These merchant families, so how do they shape the political climate? They exploited people. For one, controlling the banking industry means they can control the flow of money. How much loan do people need to actually do things like homes and businesses? They are, in essence, indebted just like they are today. Think of the power of Chase and Morgan Bank. The banks exploit the general public. So, did life really change the general public? No, we became an indebted people to these powerful merchant families, just like corporate America today. Powerful merchant families gained this influence and they began to buy their ways into leadership positions, specifically in the Roman Catholic Church. Because who else do people trust the most? They trust religious institutions. Well, they began to control those and even began to use those as a mode of exploitation of people. The families also constantly warred with one another, so it was always chaos between city states. Not uncommon for crazy things like the Pazzi conspiracy, where on Easter Sunday, a family went in and tried to kill Lorenzo Medici, one of the heads of the Renaissance, or the most powerful family, the Medici. This is the whole fundamental principle of the game Assassin's Creed, the original. But these patrons, like the Medici, also shaped and controlled civic life. They built the buildings, they built the town squares, they built the churches, they built the different cathedrals. All of civic life dominated by them, and they began to push that as their duty. Now, there's one big name besides maybe the Medici that really is remembered today. It's Machiavelli, all right? And that's not just because Tupac Shakur put a tattoo of it on his neck. Machiavelli's book, The Prince, pushed the idea of what we call Machiavellian politics today. The idea that it is better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Fear and intimidation to use control. That whatever we do, the end to assert control, the end justifies the means. And we'll look more into Machiavelli some, and that's a great activity that we'll get into. Another way we think about the long-term continuation of the Renaissance and influence in our society is the wealthy patrons. Today, who really funds our museums? There are state funded and federally funded programs, but a lot of times these are privately owned, the Guggenheim and things like that. They are very wealthy families who push our culture and preserve our culture through civic activities such as that. The banking industry is also one of the long term continuations I want you to think about. Think about how much we are controlled by banks. You will learn when you're my age, when you're in the debt that I'm in, and almost all people are in, with credit cards, mortgages, and all the stresses of adult life, that the banks have power. Now, when does it all begin to fall apart and crumble with the Renaissance? The decadence and lavish lifestyle of the Renaissance. You'll see when we get into the culture, the artwork with nudity in it, even within the churches, you'll see the women, the prostitution running rampant through Rome. Preachers like Savonarola spoke so adamantly against this as a counterculture to that Renaissance lifestyle that I do want you to realize, there was reaction to it. Savonarola being one of the populars, it led to the bonfire of the vanities when they burned many paintings and books. But probably the most important one as far as long-term effect would be Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, which is almost all of Central Europe, and the King of Spain, the most powerful nation on earth at the time, sacked Rome and imprisoned the Medici Pope Clement VII, taking him back into a Spanish dungeon, which has huge implications on the Reformation movement, which we'll get into in another unit. So there was a counterculture that established, and you'll see this lifestyle of the Renaissance and all of its glory begin to crumble because of the extravagance of that lifestyle. All right. So there's a lot of things I may not have mentioned. They may have been in your readings. They may have been in your other activities. However, what I want you to do is take the quizzes test that I'm going to post on Google Classroom and take it until you get 100. Whatever your highest score is what I'm going to record. That means if you make a 60 the first time, but the next time you make 100, I'm recording the 100. All right? Because the purpose of the activity is for you to master content. This is recall content, so you use whatever you need to use. All right. So there are your close notes. You want to make sure you've put into those highlights, because this is going to help you do some primary documents. We're going to look at our first primary document tomorrow. All right. So do not turn in this Google slide until tomorrow, but do go ahead and get started on your quizzes. Have a great day.